This is a video that concerns the life and death of every single one of us. I ask everyone watching to please stay and watch it to the end. Do your part, no matter how small, to protect our shared home. Because humanity is currently living through the 6th mass extinction, according to the latest information from November 12th to November 21st, 2025. The 30th United Nations Climate Change Conference was held in Belém, Brazil. World leaders, scientists, and social organizations gathered together, focusing on three core issues: pushing countries to strengthen their emissions reduction commitments, updating and launching global adaptation goal indicators, and refining climate finance mechanisms to jointly discuss strategies for tackling climate change. In recent days, climate-related news has repeatedly dominated trending headlines. The Earth is approaching its first dangerous climate tipping point. Atmospheric carbon dioxide levels have reached record highs. So what impact will these changes have on the global climate and human life? The answer is brutal. We are experiencing a catastrophe for life itself. The Global Systems Institute at the University of Exeter in the UK recently took the lead, publishing the 2025 Global Tipping Points report, jointly authored by 160 scientists from 87 institutions across 23 countries. The report clearly states that global tropical coral reefs have exceeded a heat tolerance threshold of 1.2 degrees Celsius and are crossing a critical survival boundary. At the same time, the World Meteorological Organization released its 2025 Greenhouse Gas Bulletin, revealing that atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations have reached historic highs, further intensifying the planet's ongoing warming. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change provides a clear definition of climate tipping points in climate systems. A tipping point refers to a critical threshold at which global or regional climate shifts from one stable state to another. Put simply, climate tipping points occur when key climate indicators reach a critical threshold range. As indicators approach the lower end of that range, the tipping point becomes activated once the upper end is crossed. The system can enter a state of full collapse, leading to massive and often irreversible changes in the climate system. Nobel Prize-winning economist William Nordhaus once offered an analogy. A canoe floating on water can remain balanced even as it starts to tilt and take on water. But once the tilt exceeds a certain angle, the canoe will capsize. That critical angle is the tipping point that leads to irreversible consequences. The 2025 Global Tipping Points report focuses on 6 climate tipping points most likely to be triggered within ecosystems. The first is the degradation of tropical coral reefs. Rising sea temperatures and ocean acidification are currently the main causes of coral bleaching and death. The second is the melting of the Antarctic ice sheet. Its melting rate is accelerating and could lead to global sea level rise. The third is the weakening of subpolar ocean convection, which could significantly affect the global distribution of heat and salinity in the oceans. The fourth is the weakening of the Atlantic Meridional Overturning circulation, a critical ocean circulation system whose slowdown would affect global climate patterns, especially in Europe and North America. The fifth is the retreat of mountain glaciers. The melting of mountain glaciers worldwide is one of the clearest signs of global warming, and it threatens regions that rely on glacier meltwater for freshwater supplies. The final tipping point is the collapse of the Amazon rainforest. Continued deforestation and drought could cause vast forest areas to turn into grasslands, releasing massive amounts of carbon dioxide and affecting both regional and global climates. In summary, all 6 tipping points are directly linked to human-driven environmental destruction. Climate tipping points have 2 defining characteristics. The first is irreversibility. The changes they bring are permanent. Once a tipping point is crossed, climate change may shift into a steeper, non-linear, exponential trajectory. In other words, efforts to avoid triggering tipping points before they are reached are meaningful. But once triggered, the climate system settles into a new equilibrium, one that will never return to its original state. The second characteristic is the difficulty of predicting when the final straw will fall. This is the most dangerous aspect. Even though people know danger is approaching, they cannot accurately predict when it will arrive by the time humanity realizes it is in danger. The tipping point has often already been crossed. What worries scientists most is that the arrival of one tipping point could trigger a domino effect, leading to glacier collapse, permafrost thaw, disruption of monsoon systems, and the death of tropical rainforests and coral reefs, along with a cascade of other tipping points. This chain reaction is especially dangerous because it could threaten one of Earth's most important climate regulators, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning circulation. The Atlantic Meridional Overturning circulation is a global ocean circulation system driven by differences in water temperature and salinity. It transports heat from the equator to the high latitudes of the North Atlantic via warm surface currents. As surface water flows northward, evaporation increases its salinity. Near Greenland, the cold, salty water sinks, forming a deep return flow. This process is critical to maintaining the mild climate of Europe and northeastern North America. For example, when climate tipping points are reached, melting Arctic ice and the Greenland ice sheet inject large amounts of fresh water into the North Atlantic, which could weaken the Atlantic Meridional overturning circulation. This weakening would redistribute global heat, reducing heat transport to the northern hemisphere and trapping more heat in the oceans of the southern hemisphere. This altered heat distribution could further accelerate the melting of the Antarctic ice sheet. In short, climate tipping points do not exist in isolation. They are interconnected and mutually reinforcing. Crossing one tipping point is likely to trigger others, ultimately leading to widespread and dramatic shifts in global climate patterns. According to the World Meteorological Organization's greenhouse gas bulletin, atmospheric carbon dioxide levels reached record highs in 2024, with concentrations reaching 423.9 parts per million, an increase of 3.5 parts per million from 2023, the largest annual rise since modern measurements began in 1957. WMO officials stated the last time Earth experienced such high carbon dioxide levels was between 3 and 5 million years ago, when humans did not yet exist. In 2024, the global average methane concentration reached 1,942 parts per billion, also a historic high. Carbon dioxide accounts for 76% of global temperature increase. Methane contributes 16%. It is foreseeable that as carbon dioxide levels continue to rise, the ability of terrestrial ecosystems and oceans to absorb carbon dioxide is weakening. The Earth may enter a vicious climate feedback loop, further accelerating global warming and the arrival of climate tipping points. Continuous human-driven carbon dioxide emissions and increasingly frequent wildfires are the primary causes of this trend. Combined with reduced carbon absorption by land and ocean systems, this may further intensify the feedback loop. Carbon dioxide emissions not only affect today's climate, but because CO2 remains in the atmosphere for centuries, their impact will persist for hundreds of years. Expanding and sustaining greenhouse gas monitoring is essential to supporting climate action. Scientific research warns that ecosystems are approaching dangerous climate tipping points and that we may already be living through the sixth mass extinction. In 1998, a research team conducted a survey, finding that about 70% of respondents believed that humanity was in the midst of a mass extinction event, although the concept of a sixth mass extinction had been proposed earlier. It appeared far more frequently in reports after that survey, deepening its impression on the public consciousness. Even today, many people still dispute the idea of a sixth mass extinction, but there is broad consensus that species are disappearing at an alarming rate. A joint statement led by 8 scientists and signed by 15,364 scientists worldwide declared that we are indeed in the midst of a sixth mass extinction, and warned that by the end of this century, most existing species could be wiped out. One of the most critical drivers remains human destruction of the natural environment. By studying biological fossils, researchers have identified at least 5 previous mass extinctions in Earth's evolutionary history. These events are marked in the fossil record by the sudden disappearance of many species between geological periods. The defining feature of mass extinctions is that within a geologically short time span, at least 75% of species vanish. Note that this timescale refers to geological time, not a human lifespan, clearly. The scale of extinction we are witnessing today fits this definition and is more intense than any previous mass extinction. Extinction itself is almost inevitable. All species may disappear for one reason or another over the course of history. The 2 most important drivers of extinction are competition for resources between species and environmental change. This normal rate of species loss is known as the background extinction rate. Studies show that today's extinction rate is 100 to 1,000 times higher than the background rate, which is 10 to 100 times greater than during any previous mass extinction. On average, 75 species go extinct every single day. We rarely notice the disappearance of obscure species, but the loss of major species is much easier to track. A study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that, since the rise of human civilization, approximately 83% of wild mammals, 80% of marine mammals, 50% of plant species, and 15% of fish species have disappeared entirely. Therefore, saying that we are living through the largest mass extinction in history is not an exaggeration. However, there is still debate about when this extinction began. Some argue that the sixth mass extinction extinction started in modern times, which is why they call it the Anthropocene extinction. The Anthropocene is an unofficial geological epoch defined by the overwhelming impact of human activity, often dated to the mid-20th century, around the time humans developed nuclear weapons. There is no doubt that since entering the Anthropocene, human-driven extinctions have reached unprecedented levels. Global warming, pollution, deforestation, and more all peaked after the start of the Anthropocene. These changes to natural habitats have pushed countless species to the brink of extinction. However, if we limit the start of the mass extinction to modern times, that perspective may be too narrow. Some researchers argue that large-scale extinctions began as early as the rise of agriculture. At least since the agricultural era, extinction rates have exceeded those of any previous period. Humans entered the agricultural age around 11,000 years ago, which coincides with the beginning of the Holocene. For this reason, the current extinction is often referred to as the Holocene extinction. The development of agriculture required constant land clearing, while human populations grew exponentially. This directly conflicted with the natural balance of ecosystems, although chemical pollution and large-scale landscape alteration were limited at the time. As competitors within ecosystems, humans held a decisive advantage, leading to the extinction of many species. In the past, our technological limits meant ocean exploitation was minimal, so marine extinction rates were relatively low, especially among large marine animals. However, with intensified ocean exploitation, since 1950 alone, global algal biomass has declined by about 40%, and coral reefs worldwide are rapidly degrading. This is why we must sound the alarm. Now that we understand the causes of extinction, we must do everything possible to prevent it and maintain a basic sense of awe and respect for nature at the same time. Scientific findings presented at this UN climate conference highlight the enormous potential positive tipping points, self-reinforcing transformations in policy, technology, finance, and behavior can drive change at unprecedented speed and scale. The vision of the 30th UN Climate Change Conference is to shift perceptions of climate tipping points from fear to hope. Positive tipping points stand in contrast to destructive ones like coral reef collapse and ice sheet melting. They refer to positive acceleration effects triggered by social, technological, or policy changes that help mitigate or reverse the climate crisis. These tipping points emphasize system-wide change driven by human action. For example, the widespread adoption of green technologies can create self-reinforcing positive feedback loops, reducing carbon emissions and accelerating the energy transition to combat global warming. Current policies promoting solar power, wind energy, electric vehicles, battery storage, and heat pumps all represent pathways toward transformation. Meanwhile, public awareness and concern about the climate crisis continue to grow. Ecosystem restoration and sustainable consumption patterns can also trigger positive feedback loops across natural and social systems. The mass death of tropical coral reefs is a stark warning. If decisive action is not taken immediately, the loss of the Amazon rainforest, ice sheets, and ocean currents will bring truly catastrophic consequences to the world. In short, we must prevent irreversible climate tipping point damage while actively triggering positive tipping points. As the only intelligent species on Earth, humanity must strive toward a future of low-carbon resilience and inclusive prosperity. Every individual should actively protect the environment and reduce unnecessary pollution. Starting now may still give us a chance. Do not turn our beautiful home into a silent and desolate graveyard.